Universal Century 0083. 3 years after the end of the catastrophic one-year war, peace on Earth and the colonies is shattered by the presence of the Delaz fleet, a rogue Zeon military group loyal to the ideals of the late dictator Giran Zavi. Delaz fleet's ace pilot Anavel Gato, once hailed as the Nightmare of Solomon, infiltrates the Federation's Torrington base in Australia and steals the nuclear-armed Gundam GP-02A Physalis prototype. Rookie pilot Ko Uraki, with the aid of the Anaheim electronics engineer Nina Purpleton and the crew of the carrier Albion, pilots the Gundam GP-01 Zephyranthus prototype in an attempt to recover the stolen Gundam unit and prevent another war from breaking out. And yes, I just totally stole that summary from my anime list because I'm a lazy motherfucker. Anyhow, 0083 sets out to do two things: bridge the gap between the first Gundam series and Zeta, and tell a dramatic character-driven story along the way. Although it does neither of these two things perfectly, it ultimately meets each of its ends quite well and manages to tell a competent story with just a few big drawbacks. The biggest complaint that people tend to have with 0083 are the characters. A lot of Gundam fans tend to bash Ko and Nina for being annoying and unlikable and find that this completely ruins the story for them. While I can certainly see why some people would dislike these two given their personalities and some of the choices that they make, I certainly do not think that they are bad characters. In fact, I find each of them to be interesting and quite complex for a short OVA such as this. They are both flawed human beings, which I think most good characters should be. Ko tends to lack a backbone and is constantly frustrated with himself for his shortcomings as a pilot and other things in the early part of the series. He can come off as somewhat angsty because of this, but honestly I never really understand it when people have a problem with characters being angsty, provided there are sensible reasons for it. I find Ko to be a pretty realistic and identifiable character in this respect. His frustrations seem to be appropriate reactions to his shortcomings, and I think that a lot of people would tend to have similar reactions in the same types of situations. Ko is very average, and this is a big part of what makes him an interesting protagonist. Thankfully, he develops as a character over time, overcoming a lot of his weaknesses and insecurities as the series progresses. Nina, on the other hand, seems to follow the exact opposite character arc. She starts out as a strong-headed woman, but slowly succumbs to her own flaws and insecurities as the series progresses. Honestly, I might get flack for this, but I think that Nina Purpleton is actually the best character in the series. The position that she is in is a much more painful predicament than any other character. What she has to go through and deal with is a very unfortunate and difficult position for anybody to be in. It is very emotionally taxing, and you can see how her ambivalence causes her to deteriorate and lose her resolve as the story progresses. Her position is a very sympathetic one, and I found it easy to relate to her and understand how she felt and why she made the choices she made. I may not agree with what she does in the end, but I can certainly put myself in her shoes and understand why she acts the way that she does. At the same time, it is easy to see the reluctance and regret that goes along with her decisions. She is definitely pained, but in the end she feels that she only has one option, and although she hates that it is the only choice she has, she takes it anyway. All of this makes for a strongly written and genuinely human character, and it is almost solely her character development that makes the drama of the series work as well as it does. One of the central themes of Gundam, especially in the Universal Century shows, is that war is primarily about the individual human beings that fight them, and because of this, the emotions of people often override any type of political or ideological or even moral alignments that motivate people to fight in the first place. Gundam understands that people involved in war won't always choose to do what makes sense, or what is right or just or best for humanity or the war effort, because selfish feelings and desires are the primary motivations for all human actions. It is a big part of what makes Gundam great. The characters are authentic human beings that can be identified with and aren't just cogs in a war machine perfectly following orders and always doing what is best for the advancement of the cause. Anyone who has seen Zeta Gundam should know exactly what I am talking about. Nina Purpleton is a fine example of this, and that is one of the reasons why I consider her to be a good character. Of course, many people will probably find both Ko and Nina to be unlikable and annoying, but there is a clear distinction between the likability of a character and the quality of a character. For example, Flay Ulster is a completely unlikable human being, but she is certainly not a poorly written character. Or, if you don't agree with me on that one, consider any other character that is a deplorable human being but still has the depth and development to back up strong characterization. Likability is important, of course, because it helps us to care about the characters, but it is by no means a requirement for a good character. When analyzing a story, it is important to separate your personal feelings for the character from your assessment of the writing of that character. But obviously, if you really hate the characters, your enjoyment of the series can plummet pretty fucking easily. Although I didn't particularly like either Ko or Nina as people, I liked them as characters, and I didn't find them so severely unlikable that it got in the way of my enjoyment of the show. But keep in mind that you might find them to be really annoying, and that might damage the series for you. It certainly has for lots of people. As for the relationship between Nina and Ko, I think it works out pretty well. They have some cute little moments, but nothing over the top that would come off as cheesy, cliched, unrealistic, or forced. You can clearly see that they care for each other, but on the downside, the series doesn't do a particularly good job at showing us why they are drawn to each other romantically. No attempts are really made to show us what attracts them to each other, why they feel so strongly for each other, or how they are supposed to work as a couple. It is better than Shiro and Aina's horribly contrived relationship from 8th MS Team. I'll get to that when I review that particular OVA. But it isn't a particularly well drawn out relationship. The two are sort of crammed together for the purposes of the plot and the drama the series is trying to create. But it serves the purpose that it is intended to serve well enough, and there is only so much development you can expect of a 13-episode OVA with as much content to get across as this. So it isn't such a big deal. However, the characterization of the series does suffer some rather unfortunate shortcomings, particularly on the antagonist side of things. Anavel Gato is an interesting character, and he is also quite likable, but he doesn't live up to his potential as a character. I completely agree with reviewer Brent Newhall on this point. There is no time dedicated to telling his story or developing his character. We don't understand why he is so devoted to his cause or see any changes from him. He is pretty much just given a list of personality and character traits, and that is all he is. This is a real shame because he is really interesting and there is lots of potential to work out a really strong character here. This would have really helped the story in a big way, especially given an important plot point near the end involving Gato, which, like the rest of his character, is completely undeveloped and tacked on, and because of this, the important plot point doesn't work out as well as it should have. Everything I just said about Gato applies equally to the other antagonist, Seema Garahal. Her character is a well of untapped potential, and her important role in the story isn't backed up with any significance or development. It just happens, and once again, the story suffers from it. This is all exacerbated by the fact that there is a lot of fluff and padding in the first half of the series, which, while harmless in itself, is time that would have been much better off if it were used to develop the antagonists. For me, this is the single biggest flaw in 0083, and ultimately holds it back from being truly great. I agree with the anime overviewer that the rivalry between Ko and Gato was meant to be a watered-down copy of the Amuro-Char rivalry, but unfortunately the rivalry isn't exceptional. It's fine and it adds to the experience, but the drawbacks to Gato's character make it a lot less interesting, and it isn't developed as well as it could have and should have been. In addition to this, the side characters are almost nothing more than flimsy tools to move along the main characters. They are like plot devices with no depth or purpose of their own. There are two exceptions: the mentor, Lieutenant Burning, who has a little bit of good stuff behind his character, and Kelly, a former Xeon pilot with a missing arm, who we spend 2 episodes with as a side story. Kelly's side story is really well done and allows the series to explore a few more themes that it otherwise wouldn't have looked into. I won't spoil it, but Kelly is a really well realized character and his side story is one of the highlights of 0083. Although once again, it might have been better to trim it down or omit it in favor of time spent working out the antagonists, but still, it is almost like a mini OVA on its own, and I really enjoy it, so I'm not counting it as a flaw. Again, it is understandable that the side characters are mostly just empty vessels given the time constraints, but it is still unfortunate and their personalities aren't really enjoyable enough to enrich the experience. The anime overviewer claimed that he felt the characters of 0083 weren't bad, they just weren't particularly memorable. I agree with this for the most part. The characters aren't going to stand out as some of the best in Gundam or even at a middle level. Part of this is just a consequence of it being an OVA as opposed to a full series. However, the main characters are well developed enough to make for a good story, and the characterization is competent, if not spectacular. A big plus for Gundam fans is that this series tells a really engaging political and military conflict which provides essential information to the overall narrative of the Universal Century timeline, particularly the events leading up to the highly regarded Zeta Gundam. Because of this, I really recommend watching Zeta Gundam before 0083. I originally watched the UC timeline in the canonical order, so I first saw 0083 before Zeta, and while I still enjoyed it, I wasn't able to appreciate the political narrative as much as I was the second time around when I had Zeta as background to enrich the experience. The animation is really crisp and well detailed. It is a testament to the quality of the animation that it still holds up quite well to this day, almost 25 years after its release. However, some of the character designs are unappealing. Nina and Ko have terrible haircuts, which makes their designs kind of dull for me, and the facial structures for most of the characters are oddly elongated. But whether or not one enjoys the character designs is purely a matter of one's own aesthetic preferences. The mech designs are fine, but not spectacular. The GP-02, however, really stands out. Its design is powerful, original, and bulky without being cluttered and overloaded. The music is also superb. The 2 opening themes are really great, upbeat pop rock songs, which capture the fast-paced action of the series, and the ending themes are nice, light, romantic numbers which capture the love story side of the series. It makes for a nice contrast that captures the mood of the series really well. In conclusion, Gundam 0083 is one of the stronger OVA entries in Gundam. It tells a good story with sympathetic and relatable main characters, and contains an excellent political narrative that the Gundam faithful will really appreciate. Because of this, it is required viewing for any Gundam fan. But anyone who is looking for a quick little action mecha anime with a decent story can enjoy it even if they are unfamiliar with the Gundam franchise. It is a little rough around the edges, and that holds it back from being truly great, but it still delivers a really good viewing experience. My final verdict is that Stardust Memory gets a grade of B+. The things it does well, it doesn't do well enough to push it into elite territory, but the flaws it has don't drag it down far enough to hold it back from being a really good anime. And most importantly, Stardust Memory is just a hell of a lot of fun to watch.